Okay, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Scott. I'm the manager of capital planning at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. And tonight we'll be discussing MassDOT's draft fiscal year 25 through 29 capital investment plan. To get things started, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Raisa Kwame, who's going to review the meeting protocols.
Thank you, Michelle. My name is Raisa Kwame, and I am one of the MassDOT producers this evening alongside Miranda Mersenio, who will help facilitate the question and comment session. Let's take a minute to review your Zoom controls. On the bottom of your screen, you will find your audio settings. Your microphones are muted during the meeting, but you will have the opportunity to speak during the questions and comments session at the end of the presentation by using the raise hand function to indicate you wish to speak. You can rename yourself by clicking the participants button to open the participants list, finding your name, and then clicking rename. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, you can put them in the chat box and we will address them during the question and comment session. If you need to attend the meeting by phone, please dial 1-312-626-6799 and enter meeting ID 885-0449-6692 and passcode 173588. If you are experiencing technical difficulties and require assistance, please dial 857-276-0893. Finally, you may view live closed captioning generated by Zoom by selecting the CC icon at the bottom of your screen. Meeting notes and procedures. This virtual public meeting will be recorded. The Massachusetts Department of Transportation may choose to retain and distribute the video, images, audio, and/or chat transcript. All parts of this meeting are considered public record. By continuing attendance with this virtual public meeting, you are consenting to participate in a recorded event. If you are not comfortable being recorded, please turn off your camera and keep your microphone muted, or you may choose to excuse yourself from the meeting. Important notes. Your microphone and camera are automatically disabled upon entering the meeting. The meeting will be open to questions and answers at the end of the presentation. Your feedback is important. All MassDOT activities, including public meetings, are free of discrimination. MassDOT complies with all federal and state civil rights requirements preventing discrimination based on sex, race, color, ancestry, national origin, limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, or veteran status. We welcome the diversity from across our entire service area. If you have any questions or concerns, please visit this website to reach the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. Thank you, and I will now hand it back to Michelle.
Thanks so much, Raisa. So before we get rolling with the formal presentation, we're going to have a quick welcome from the metropolitan planning organizations that oversee the spending of federal funds for transportation for Southeast Massachusetts. These include the Old Colony Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is staffed by the Old Colony Planning Council, and we appreciate them hosting the meeting this evening. And also, we appreciate the support of the Southeastern Massachusetts Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is staffed by the Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District. So with that, I'll turn it over first to Old Colony Planning Council staff member Bill McNulty for welcome from OCPC.
Thank you, Michelle. So my name is Bill McNulty. I'm a principal transportation planner with Old Colony Planning Council. For those not familiar with Old Colony, so we're the MPO that serves the greater Brockton-Stoughton area and much of Plymouth County. So basically the eastern portion of Southeastern Massachusetts, not including Cape Cod. We're honored to be able to co-host this meeting tonight with our colleagues at both MassDOT and SERPED. And we so this past spring, the Old Colony NPO endorsed our federal fiscal year 2025 to 2029 Transportation Improvement Program. That program was our most robust TIP to date. It included $234 million in highway and bridge projects for the 17 communities of the Old Colony region. as well as $63 million in transit projects for the Brockton Area Transit Authority. And that was done through this continued collaborative and cooperative effort with MassDOT. And I think this capital investment plan reflects that cooperation between MassDOT and the MPOs to provide a safe, efficient, and sustainable transportation network, not only in Southeastern Massachusetts, but across the entire Commonwealth. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight a couple of additional projects we're excited about here in the Old Colony region. First and foremost, we're developing a Safe Streets for All regional comprehensive safety action plan, a Vision Zero plan. This is being done through a $320,000 SS4A grant that was awarded to Old Colony from the Federal Highway Administration through their bipartisan infrastructure law discretionary grants program. So that would, in total, it's $400,000, so $320,000 in federal funds. And then we're very grateful from MassDOT for the $80,000 in matching funds for a total of $400,000. We've contracted with a consultant, Beta Group Incorporated, and this work began earlier this year and will continue to continue through the rest of this year with a completed plan expected about a year from now in early summer 2025. And finally, through the federal fiscal year 2025 Unified Planning Work Program, which will launch this fall in October, we're conducting 3 corridor studies in the region, so we're very excited about this. The first and foremost, the first being the Route 28 corridor in Avon, then the Route 104 corridor in Bridgewater, and the Route 38 corridor in Plymouth. These corridor studies are important because they help identify targeted locations where future investments can be made to improve and maintain our transportation network in these communities. So we're very excited about that. And you can always find out more about these projects or any of our programs in Old Colony Planning Council by visiting our website, which is oldcolonyplanning.org. And so with that, I thank you for joining us tonight, and I'll hand it over to my colleague Jackie Jones at SERPED.
Thank you, Bill. I am Jackie Jones. I am the Assistant Director of Transportation Planning at SERPED. If you're not familiar with SERPED, we are the regional planning agency for the 27 communities that make up Southeastern Mass, including Fall River, New Bedford, Attleboro, and Taunton. We border Rhode Island to the west. We have a significant amount of Cape to the south. I'm sorry, not Cape. We have a significant amount of coast to the south. The Cape region is to our east, and the OCPC region is northeast of us. Like Bill said, we are very grateful for our close working relationship with MassDOT and OCPC, as well as our communities. The Capital Improvement Program encompasses many important projects and funding sources for our region, including transportation and transit projects that are listed in our regional transportation program and the statewide transportation improvement program. Some of the 2 larger ones that you might be familiar with are the New Bedford Superstructure Project and the Fall River Route 79 DeVol Street Project. The goal of the New Bedford Superstructure Project is to address an aging poor overpass through the city that will improve safety throughout the I-95 Route 18 interchange and improve conditions for bicycles and pedestrians on adjoining local roads. The Route 79 DeVol Street Project in Fall River is removing an outdated elevated highway structure that is costly to maintain and replacing it with a boulevard that's accessible to pedestrians and cyclists. This project will reconnect the city with its waterfront and provide economic development opportunities. It's currently under construction now, but it's a multi-year project, and we're very excited to see the outcome of both of those projects as well as our other ones. The CIP also encompasses funding for municipal programs that our communities are reliant on to help maintain and expand their infrastructure for all transportation modes, such as Chapter 90, Complete Streets, Municipal Small Bridge Program, Municipal Pavement Program. I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more about that coming up. But we're very grateful for those programs, and our communities rely on them very heavily. So we're happy to see funding for that in this. It also includes funding for our airport improvements, most notably for our region, the New Bedford Regional Airport. We regularly engage with the public in Southeastern Mass about transportation issues, barriers, and priorities for improvement through various channels. Most recently, we've been tabling at community events across the region for our regional pedestrian plan. And we've heard from residents and workers in the region that they would like their communities to be safer, more walkable, and to have access to alternate modes of transportation. They've voiced concerns primarily about dangerous intersections, poor crossing, vehicle speeds, poor sidewalk conditions, poor lighting, and access to reliable transit. And we're happy to see a lot of those things reflected in the CIP. Thank you very much. I will turn it back over to the host now.
Thank you so much, Bill and Jackie, and great to be working with you on this. So moving into the presentation, this slide highlights kind of the three major high points we hope folks will come away with. First is just what the CIP is. Our rolling capital plan guides the planning, construction, and capital maintenance of the transportation system for the next 5 years and outlines how we'll spend financial resources to accomplish that. An important component of developing this plan is input and feedback from stakeholders and residents throughout the Commonwealth. This input and feedback supports us in a couple ways. First, at high level investment strategy, down into creating programs to advance our priorities and for the inclusion of projects within the CIP. And so our draft CIP for fiscal years 25 through 29 is now available for public review and comment. And we hope you'll review this plan in detail and give us your feedback. Sorry about that. Some more detail about what the CIP is overall. Again, this is a plan that we update on an annual basis. It's financially constrained to the resources that we have available, and I'll talk more about the sources in a minute. It shows the plan spending for projects by year, so projects can appear in the CIP over multiple years, reflecting their overall construction or implementation timeline. We have a diversity of investments ranging from roads and bridges to bicycle and pedestrian facilities, state-funded transit for both the MBTA and RTAs throughout the Commonwealth, state rail network, public use airports, MassDOT services such as for planning or information technology, and capital investments for the Registry of Motor Vehicles. The diagram on the right portion of the slide highlights the framework we use to put together the CIP. It's one we've used for a number of development cycles in recent years. It's grounded in three major priorities: reliability, which is focused on maintaining and improving system condition; modernization, which takes things up a level to improve safety, accessibility, and to accommodate economic growth; and then expansion, which involves providing more options for travel throughout the Commonwealth. And in recent years, this category has primarily been focused on our state bicycle and pedestrian network and our state rail network. So to advance these three major priority areas, we have CIP programs. They are kind of buckets for individual investments, and then they house within them specific projects such as bridge improvements, such as curb cut and accessibility upgrades, and for example, on the expansion side, shared use paths. So talking a little bit more about where we get our funding, the slide here highlights 4 different major sources of funding for the CIP. On the federal side, we get regular transportation formula dollars from the various USDOT modal administrations. MassDOT also competes for funding from federal grant programs. And if we are awarded funds to the competitive processes, these dollars are included in the CIP. On the state side, we have a number of different sources. State bond cap refers to general obligation bond proceeds that are allocated to MassDOT from the Executive Office for Administration and Finance. We also have a number of special obligation bond proceeds for things like bridges and the rail enhancement program that are dedicated to specific types of projects. On the MassDOT side, we have the revenues from our toll facilities, the Metropolitan Highway System, Western Turnpike, and Tobin Bridge. Those funds are reinvested into capital improvements on those facilities. And our other sources includes municipal, local, and third-party contributions and trusts such as the Central Artery Project Repair and Maintenance Trust Fund. So when approaching developing a CIP for fiscal years 25 through 29, we had a number of internal and external factors that shaped our approach. On the external side, of course, is federal policy and funding levels. Our plans are most recently influenced by the bipartisan infrastructure law. This not only expanded resources for transportation throughout the nation and for Massachusetts specifically, and also set policies, for example, around spending for climate and for resiliency that guide the way we spend dollars in the CIP. Similarly, we have the availability of Commonwealth level funding, as well as funding from our toll systems that affect our approach. We're continuing to monitor and respond to travel demands, conditions, and needs when we're planning out the CIP. Partner agency planning processes also have a big influence. We will be talking a little bit more about those within the presentation. And then, of course, feedback that we receive about past and upcoming CIPs. On the internal side, we have the priorities of the Healey-Driscoll administration. For example, increased emphasis on safety, climate, and partnerships with municipalities to increase affordability and livability. Within MassDOT specifically, our major plans and strategic initiatives, such as the development of Beyond Mobility, our MassDOT statewide long-range transportation plan, have an influence on how we approach the CIP. You may be familiar with the Beyond Mobility plan, for which public comment recently closed, and MassDOT is in the process of finalizing. This has an influence on this CIP in terms of developing priorities, but will also go on to have an even bigger influence on future CIPs as we incorporate its priorities and action steps. Other examples of factors influencing the plan include MassDOT's modal and asset management plans, such as its bicycle and pedestrian plans, its performance measures, and identified process improvements. So talking a little bit more about priorities, wanted to highlight some investment focus areas within our broader reliability, modernization, and expansion framework that we set for fiscal year 25 through 29. They include the items shown on screen, focuses on safety, climate stewardship, both from the decarbonization and resiliency angle, asset management to support safe and reliable travel, and partnerships with municipalities. And a cross-cutting theme across all these areas is advancing social and geographic equity. So talking a little bit more about factors affecting specific items that are included in the CIP. We talked a little bit about broad strategic factors, but some of the factors that may affect the ability to include individual investments are not only dependent on our available funding, but also, for example, on the reliability side, we look to our asset management systems for things like bridges and pavement to prioritize projects that are in most need for improvement given their condition. For some of our modernization and expansion investments, our selection is supported by criteria schemes that may emphasize different areas such as economic vitality or the environment, and those help to boost projects to meet those needs. Of course, the actual status of the project has an influence as well. Looking at whether the project's been initiated through the relevant process, for a highway project, for example, looking at the status of that project in terms of its design or implementation also affects its ability to be included in the CIP. And coming back to what I alluded to earlier with partner agency processes, these include decisions that may be made by RTAs, the MBTA, or metropolitan planning organizations in particular. For example, my colleagues from OCPC and SERPED, talked about development of their transportation improvement programs. These are activities overseen by metropolitan planning organizations, and we do incorporate the content of those programs, both within the State Transportation Improvement Program, as well as the CIP itself. So the diagram on the right portion of the slide shows the overall makeup of the CIP. Those boxes in green highlight elements that come from the MPO planning processes, the federal aid highway projects that are included in MPO tips, as well as state funding that matches federally aided transit projects that are included in tips. The other items in blue are the other items included in the CIP. So you can kind of see that these tip-related components are a really important part of determining the overall CIP. Ultimately, if you are engaged in your area MPO's planning process, know that the engagement you have in the role you play in decision-making helps to shape the CIP for the Commonwealth overall. Just a quick word about our overall timeline. We developed the CIP over roughly a 10-month process that begins in the fall. The bars here highlight the major steps. They're long bars because this is a pretty iterative process as we get new information about project status, funding availability, and things of that nature that inform what's ultimately included in the CIP. Right now, we're in that kind of maroon colored bar phase of finalizing the plan and encouraging review. The stars highlight our engagement with the MassDOT Board of Directors, who is responsible for reviewing and approving the capital investment plan. We brought a draft plan before them at their meeting in June, and they approved the release of that plan for public review. And we'll be bringing a final plan with updates since the draft for their review at their July meeting, and hopefully obtaining approval for a plan for 25 to 29. So this slide functions as our spending dashboard for the CIP. That top table organizes spending by our three major priorities: reliability, modernization, and expansion, as well as by MassDOT division. You'll notice there is spending for the MBTA here, and I'll talk a little bit more about that spending further in the presentation. The table on the bottom right shows overall spending for the CIP. It's about a $16.5 billion plan. The donut chart on the bottom right-hand portion of the slide shows the proportions of spending by priority area. You can see that approximately 61% of investments are focused on reliability, so that condition and state of good repair category, with another 23% focused on modernization and making those safety and accessibility upgrades and things of that nature. So a little bit more about CIP content. It includes more than 50 investment programs and more than 1,600 individual investments. We are introducing some new investment programs with this CIP, include those to improve freight movement on the National Highway Freight Network, support for transportation management associations through a new grant program, and a water transportation pilot for communities around Boston Harbor. The diagram on the right shows spending for the top 10 MassDOT CIP programs. And you can see that far and away, the biggest one is bridge, with approximately $5.4 billion for rehabilitating, replacing, or otherwise improving bridges throughout the Commonwealth. Other examples include programs relating to pavement, roadway reconstruction, bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and a variety of other things. Within this plan, we have approximately $847 million in investments for the MBTA, and approximately $269 million of the spending in the CIP is supported by federal competitive grant awards. So I wanted to highlight some investments that relate to the focus areas I explained earlier. So in that safety and asset management category, I've talked a little bit about the bridge program already. We also have $577 million for public use airport improvements. We have safety elements integrated throughout our CIP programs across multiple modes, but do want to highlight that to complement safety elements of roadway reconstruction and upgrade projects, we do have a safety program that focuses on systematic road safety improvements. So looking for the types of upgrades that can be made in multiple locations across the Commonwealth to help reduce traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries. On the climate side, we think about climate investments in a couple ways. First category being providing alternatives to car and truck travel. So we have 565 million in spending to support active transportation options and focus programs to deliver things like shared use paths and other bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We have 439 million for our rail investments and another 370 million to support RTAs and local transit operators. For resiliency, we have 82 million in a program that's dedicated for culvert and stormwater improvements, dam upgrades and things of that nature, and approximately 89 million to provide charging stations along major roadways. For partnerships with municipalities, we have more than 1.3 billion in grant programs to support local transportation needs. So talking a little bit more about the state-funded items for the MBTA, we have a separate CIP from the one produced by the MBTA. There is a little bit of overlap between the two plans, and this is really around Commonwealth-funded investments for the MBTA. That could be investments through the Rail Enhancement Program or through state bond cap funds, things of that nature. So as I mentioned earlier, we have 847 million in Commonwealth-funded investments for the T. Some highlights within this are spending for bi-level commuter rail coach procurement, red and orange line vehicle procurement, spending for South Coast Rail, and a number of other investments in this overall category. I want to talk as well a little bit more about that more than 1.3 billion for partnerships for municipalities. These include, of course, the Chapter 90 program, which is the biggest source of grant program support in the CIP. We've been able to boost this by a little bit, over $1 billion for 25 through 29. And to complement these, we have a number of other MassDOT provided grant programs, our longstanding Complete Streets program, programs to reduce local roadway bottlenecks, improvements to pavement and small bridges that may not be eligible for federal aid dollars, and the Shared Streets and Spaces program, which was rolled out during the COVID-19 pandemic as a way to improve streets to support bicyclists and pedestrians, outdoor dining, access to transit, and other features, which has continued even as we're in a more post-pandemic space. You can find out more about these individual programs on MassDOT's Grant Central online portal. This provides details about the programs and is kind of the interface for communities to apply and work with MassDOT on applications and awards. And you can check out more about that using the QR code below. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about some highlights specific to Southeastern Massachusetts. Again, these are by no means the inclusive list of all of the investments for Southeastern Massachusetts that are in the CIP, and we'll be talking a little bit more later in the presentation about how you can explore the CIP to learn more. And again, the values here, as noted on the bottom of the slide, reflect planned fiscal year 25 through 29 spending. This may not be the total cost of the project, but that information is available in more detail in the CIP as well. So we've broken up these highlights into a couple of different categories. This particular slide focuses on roadway and bridge highlights. Some of these touch on items that my SERPED and OCPC colleagues alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, including things like the I-195 to Route 18 interchange rehabilitation project, the corridor improvements on Route 79, Duval Street and Fall River. We have, a variety of other projects, interchange improvements in Taunton at routes 24 and 140, as well as a number of other more local roadway or intersection improvement work. For other categories, we have, of course, elements related to climate and resiliency. One way we support that is helping regional transit authorities match federal dollars and otherwise pursue efforts to electrify their fleets. So this includes spending support for the Southeastern Regional Transit Authority to purchase electric buses. On the resiliency side, one of the major resiliency projects in the CIP is culvert and dam replacement work happening in Wareham. On the active transportation side, we have a number of different types of projects. Examples here are the safe routes to school improvements at Leroy Wood Elementary School in Fairhaven and shared use path construction happening in Marion. Also a number of projects for other modes, air, rail, and transit, including support for the Brockton Area Transit Authority's maintenance facility renovations, improvements for the portion of the state rail network within the Southeast Massachusetts region, as well as supports for airports. And we have the Plymouth Airport runway extension example highlighted here, but again, by no means a comprehensive picture of all that the CIP has for Southeastern Massachusetts. So now to talk a little bit about what you can explore in the document. You can find this available at mass.gov/CIP in a couple of different formats. We have a PDF as well as an Esri story map, which makes it possible to explore some interactive visualizations in terms of spending and sources and things of that nature. The CIP is broken up into three main parts. The main document is the narrative that describes how we put the CIP together and highlights some aspects of the investment included therein. The Appendix A documents individual CIP projects, and the Appendix B describes our CIP investment programs in more detail. So again, this is a draft document. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be working towards a final version that will go before the MassDOT Board of Directors. This final version will reflect any changes in spending since the draft release, as well as the results of an equity analysis that looks at MassDOT and MBTA investments across the Commonwealth and see how spending is distributed both across municipalities in terms of geographic equity, as well as for Title VI and environmental justice populations from a social equity standpoint. So now that our draft is available for public review, we're talking a little bit about public engagement. Again, our public comment period kicked off last Thursday on June 20th. We had a legislative briefing and a public meeting in Western Mass earlier today, as well as the meeting happening now. And again, we appreciate folks' participation in this event. We do have other meetings planned for other regions within Massachusetts. You know, the dates and relative regions are shown on the slide, and the QR code will take you to more details about other meetings that are happening. These CIP meetings all kind of feature the same fundamental information about the 25 to 29 draft CIP with some regional project highlights like I just presented. We do accept comments about any aspect of the CIP at any meeting. So if you know someone who was interested but couldn't make it tonight, you know, definitely encourage them to come to one of the other meetings if they can, because we're definitely happy to accept comments at those. We also take comments via email, letter, or a web-based tool that I'll talk about in a minute. So all this will feed into the comments that we'll be bringing back to the MassDOT Board of Directors at their July meeting, when we'll be requesting their approval of a final CIP. So just talking a little bit more about the MassDOT project viewer, you can see, you know, this is a tool that you can use to kind of filter through different projects, either by mode or MassDOT division or other features. And then within projects that are included in the CIP, if you click on a project, it opens up a window where you can navigate to provide public comment. And that's a way that you can comment on individual projects more specifically within the overall tool. So this is just one of the different ways we accept public comment in case folks are interested in doing that. I want to talk a little bit about how MassDOT uses CIP feedback. So we use this and share comments of all stripes with our divisions, and as applicable with some of our planning partners, such as in the MBTA, for example. We consider approaches to comment in a couple different ways. So comments we receive about specific projects that are planned or underway are shared with MassDOT's divisions, and those comments can inform activities related to implementing the project or continuing its design or construction. If a project is not yet included in the CIP, we share those comments with our division as well. That lets them know kind of what public interest is in various projects, and can sometimes be a jumping off point to get projects initiated and into the development process if that's not happened already. The next level up, thinking about programs and priorities, feedback about these helps us to determine if new programs are needed or how to size the programs that we have. And then in terms of the development process, comments about the CIP can inform both our broader investment strategy, but also about how we communicate with folks about the CIP. So last item I want to touch on is a little bit tangential, but ultimately ties back to the CIP. This is work happening now for the Massachusetts travel study. And this is a survey activity where MassDOT is collecting information about households' daily transportation habits to understand how different parts of the transportation system, be they roadways or transit or bicycle pedestrian options, are being used for people to meet their day-to-day travel needs. And so the more we know about how people are using these facilities, this can guide policies for improving them in the future, which in turn informs future CIPs. So households have been invited to participate in the study according to a random sample to making sure we're getting good coverage across Massachusetts. If your household has received an invitation to participate in the travel survey, we really hope that you will participate. The Massachusetts Travel Study website has more about the different options that exist for providing your survey responses, about rewards for participating in the survey, as well as answers to questions you may have. So again, definitely want to encourage invited folks to participate, and anyone is interested in it to learn more via the Travel Study website. So that concludes my comments about the CIP, and at this point, I'll turn things over to my colleague Raisa to get us started on Q&A and public comment.
Thank you, Michelle. To ask a question verbally, please use the raise hand icon and we will give you access to unmute your microphone. Please state your name and share only one question at a time so everyone has a chance to participate. You may also submit written questions or comments to the host using the chat panel, and we will read them out loud. To ask a question on the phone, dial *9, and we will call out the last 4 digits of your number and unmute your audio.
Looks like we've got a raised hand from Thomas Hurley. I will ask you to unmute.
Okay. And can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead and ask your question.
All right. Well, it's actually a comment. I wanted to identify myself. My name is Tom Hurley. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Airport Management Association, and I also serve as a commissioner at the Plymouth Municipal Airport. So I'm wearing 2 hats here today. I really want to thank you for holding these public discussions. We really appreciate it, as we do the work of Secretary Tibbetts, not in the MassDOT Board of Directors, and of course, the leadership of the MassDOT Aeronautics team. We want to encourage the Board of Directors to fully support the $577 million that appear in the draft statement that we read already today. Many people don't realize that that $577 million in many ways is leveraged with federal funds to amplify the effect of these on the modernization and the make the airports even more reliable. The airports in the state employ indirectly or directly more than 200,000 people. They're the seedbeds of military activity, of general aviation, of commercial aviation, of education, public safety, and public service. So it's a good investment, and we just encourage the board of directors to do that. There are 35 public use airports in the state, 10 of which are privately owned. The other 25 are owned mostly and operated by municipalities. They're spread all across, and of course, here in Southeastern Massachusetts, we have more than a half dozen, including my own Plymouth Airport. So on behalf of all of these airports and the 150 members of the Massachusetts Airport Management Association, we thank you for your attention today, and we encourage the draft number of $577 million in improvement funds over the next 5 years to be passed. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Mr. Hurley, and we'll definitely be sharing your comments with the MassDOT Board of Directors to support the final CIP. And we really appreciate your attendance tonight and your support for that portion of the capital plan.
Thank you.
Maybe just, well, folks may be thinking of other questions. Do want to highlight, when we're, in addition to the conversation that we'll be having with the board members at the July Board of Directors meeting, which is on July 17th, we do post, following the conclusion of the CIP development process, a matrix on our CIP website that highlights the different comments that we've received at a somewhat summarized level, focusing on topic or project, and then MassDOT's response to those comments. So that's something you can look to see following the conclusion of the CIP development process later this summer.
Thank you everyone for your questions and comments. If there aren't any more, I will now hand it back to Michelle to close out the meeting.
All right, well, I want to thank everyone again for attending this evening. We really appreciate your interest in and participation in this process. Again, our public comment period is open through July 10th. These comments made at the meeting tonight are made part of our comment record, but if you have other comments, definitely feel free to attend other meetings or provide them by email, letter, or other means. And we hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Thanks so much.